In the next 6 minutes and 40 seconds, I'll take you through a tried and tested framework for briefing activities for training groups. I'm assuming you're involved in training adults in either a corporate, educational or community setting. Creating these activity briefings would be part of the work you do in designing and developing your training. You might be asking, why do you need this? There are countless examples of training groups where the trainer thinks they've given a clear briefing, but the group then wastes time in confusion or chaos. If the briefing had been planned and delivered more effectively in the first place, a lot of time and frustration could have been saved. Put yourself in the shoes of a learner. What are you thinking when the trainer starts to brief an activity? Things like, who will I end up working with this time? Have I got time to get a coffee or pop to the toilet? Or, why are we having to do this? To help your brain remember my framework, I've got a mnemonic. A mnemonic is something intended to assist the memory, such as a verse, song or formula. The use of rhyme, rhythm or song helps us to memorise things in a sequence which otherwise would be hard to commit to memory. The mnemonic I have for briefing training group activities is TRaMCaRS. Think of it as a way of getting a training group from the start of an activity through to the end, staying on the right tracks. Essentially, all letters except the A's stand for one element that you include in the briefing, and the order of the letters dictate the order the elements go in. The T of TRaMCaRS is for task. Always start an activity briefing with what you want the learners to do. It could be create a poster to show key tips from a session, or place different methods on a grid according to their best use. It's important to remember to put the task element of your briefing right at the beginning. Here, it's most likely to be heard by the learners, as other issues such as group size, time or equipment aren't coming in to confuse things or create anxieties. The R of TRaMCaRS is for reason. After concisely stating the task, give an explanation of why the activity is important at this stage in the training. This might be to give time to think through application, provide an opportunity to practice skills, or test how much of the training is stuck in your memory. This comes after the statement of task so that everyone can be really clear what they're going to be doing without getting into debate about the reasons. It's before everything else so that the learners can be motivated by the reasons given and have a positive attitude towards doing the activity before hearing the rest of the briefing. M is for method. This is a description of how the learners will go about the task. It could be populate a grid with real examples, or play a board game where winning involves correct application of all the rules and procedures. So, the methods part of TRaMCaRS is the how of an activity, where the task was what and reason was why. This is where the briefing can begin to get more complicated, so it's left until the learners have heard the basic task and been motivated by the reason to do it. The C stands for context. Here's where you give the conditions and resources with which the task will be completed. Individual work, pairs or groups? And how will pairs or groups form? What resources are available? Where should the learners work? And importantly, how long do learners have to complete the task? The logistics of completing a training activity don't get introduced until quite late in the briefing, because it's these that can get confusing for learners and can create anxiety about pressure to perform or working with others. The biggest mistake I see trainers make is to leap in too early with phrases about timescales or group sizes. The second R of TRaMCaRS is report back. You explain the way you'd like the learners to debrief their work at the end of the activity. It could be one person from a small group talking through their flip chart, the whole of a subgroup getting involved in the debrief, or the trainer looking at ideas and asking questions about only a few. It's logical to explain the report back mechanism towards the end of the briefing, once everyone's clear about the activity itself. It's often entirely left out by trainers and can create a surprise when, at the end of an activity, the trainer announces how they'd like learners to debrief. If the report back is part of the group's learning, it's important that this is as clear as everything else. And finally, S is for summary. Here you concisely repeat the key components of the activity so that learners go away with absolute clarity about what's expected. You are likely to reiterate the task, method, groupings, locations and timescales at least. A summary at the end of the briefing really does make sense, doesn't it? It gives a second chance to anyone that got distracted earlier, though you should keep briefings as concise as possible to maintain interest. Sometimes it can be a good idea to have this summary written up as a visual too, for learners to refer to during the activity. So, let's see if I can follow the framework in less than 40 seconds. I'd like you to think of a training activity where the briefing could be improved by applying TRaMCaRS. The reason I want you to do this is to take the theory of this framework into practice so that you can decide whether it will work for you. Do this with the TRaMCaRS formula in front of you on some paper and write the elements against each letter. Work on your own in a quiet place and take 15 minutes. You can discuss with a colleague trainer next time you're working together. In summary, apply TRaMCaRS to your own training activity to see if it can improve your activity briefings. Thank you for watching my video about the TRaMCaRS framework for shaping training activity briefings. The framework and ideas are my own, though many of the photographs are not. I created the slideshow in PowerPoint using the Pachachka rules of 20 slides and 20 seconds a slide. I'm Alison Lewis of Spiral Training and Associates Limited.